Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us for today's episode of The Outlet. Today's episode of The Outlet, Lunch and Learn with SheTek's Extraordinary Women. Today's episode is the second episode in the ongoing SheTek webinar series. I'm Meg Virag, Program Coordinator at SheTek, and I'll be your host today. We'll be recording today's webinar, and we'll be sure to get you all a link to the recording once it's available. We'll also have time for a Q&A with today's guests after our interview is completed, so please submit all questions in the chat box as they come to mind. Today's episode of The Outlet is brought to you by SheTek, an initiative of PamTen Inc., devoted and dedicated to increasing the number of women in the tech pipeline. Today's episode is an interview about decision-making skills and flexibility strategies for professionals today between two of the top women in business in New Jersey, Chaya Pamula of SheTek and PamTen, and Brenda Ross-Dulan of the Ross-Dulan Group and Chairman of the Board at the Princeton Regional Chamber of Commerce.
So, hi Brenda, welcome to our webinar.
Good morning. Pleasure.
Chaya Pamula is SheTek, who we just heard from, is SheTek's co-founder and also the co-founder, CEO, and president of PamTen Inc., an award-winning global IT services and staffing organization. Chaya is a technologist, philanthropist, a visionary, mentor, an entrepreneur, and above all, a passionate human being. She holds an MBA and executive education certification from Harvard University. With over 25 years of IT experience, Chaya has led numerous productivity initiatives involving business process improvement, transformation, portfolio optimization. Chaya also combined her business acumen and passion for charity to found Softkin, a nonprofit that creates loving and caring homes for destitute and underprivileged children. Softkin operates in the US and in India and provides a supportive, nurturing home to over 100 beautiful children. Chaya also later went on to form SheTek, an initiative of PamTen, which raises the percentage of women representing the tech industry pipeline. And that's part of why we're here today. Our guest today is Brenda Ross-Dulan. She's an award-winning business executive, thought leader, and board director. As principal of the Ross-Dulan Group, it's a strategy firm designed for CEOs and executives to help make them better quality decisions and then convert those decisions into actions which result in long-term success, which is really important to so many of us today. As a leader of the firm, or the leader of the firm, Brenda leverages her 25-year career in the ever-challenging financial services industry to help leaders successfully navigate periods of challenge and change, or simply move beyond the status quo to realize long, immediate, sustained results. Definitely dealing with a lot of change today, so you can see why it's so great that we have Brenda here with us. Brenda has been ranked as one of the nation's most powerful women in corporate America by Black Enterprise magazine and has received dozens of accolades as a leading executive. She served on the boards of directors at NJTV, Cooper's Ferry Economic Development Association, Princeton Regional Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey, and the Greater Trenton Initiative. Brenda is guided by her personal mission to make a difference in the lives of others and to leave them better off, which is key to SheTek's mission as well. Makes us perfectly suited to join us on today's episode of The Outlet. Now I'm going to hand it over to Chaya so she can help us get the interview started. Chaya, let's get to know Brenda together.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Meg, for wonderful introductions. And Brenda, welcome again. So let's get started. I mean, there is so much to discuss today, but we have a few questions for you. Maybe that will lead into a lot more involved conversation, and we would be able to learn a lot more about you. So Brenda, I know that you previously worked at Wells Fargo for over 24 years in various senior level positions. And then you decided to start your own strategic consulting firm, Ross-Dulan Group. So I'm really curious to understand what made you make that move, and how did you come to realize that you have such a wonderful gift for effective decision making, which is always a big challenge for many of us, right? So what made you want to share your gift with others through your company?
Well, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. I do want to also thank Meg for the time that she has spent with me prior to this to sort of get us prepared for today. Anybody who knows me knows that I talk, quite a bit, and sort of trying to corral me in my efforts is probably a little bit tough. So thank you, Meg. And I really want to take a minute and just say thank you to you. I do appreciate the invitation to be here. And I also just want to thank you for being the kind of leaders that women and all leaders really need to emulate. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, you believe that obviously, you know, business people have to make great decisions and make money and be successful, but you truly believe in leaving a legacy and impacting other people's lives. And in the end, I think that's really what will count. So I appreciate that. And the fact that you serve on the board of the Princeton Chamber with me, and this is your second time seeing me this week, so I appreciate that. So I'm going to sort of probably take a longer route to answering your question. So anytime anybody asks me about sort of, you know, my passion and how do I actually get to this place of decision making, I always try to get to the point, but I think it's important for you to sort of, you know, follow this journey. One of the things that I learned very, very early on was that I was just a bit of a math geek. And I don't really remember how I actually got to this place, but, you know, when I was getting ready for college, I remember not remembering all of what I learned in terms of, you know, what the SAT was about, but I remember scoring in the 99th percentile. And then scoring that in the 8th grade, actually deciding that I wanted to be an actuary. So how goofy is that? Like, who in the 8th grade decides that they want to be an actuary? But it is what I understood how to do. It is what I thought my talent was. So I went to college. I learned this I was very comfortable in this sort of technical space. But then after having a couple of internships, I realized that what I remember about those internships was, yes, Brenda did a great job. She contributed to the decision making. She got her work in on time. But the thing that really resonated with me is how people felt about what their interaction was with me. That in some way, they felt like their lives have been impacted just by simply working with me. And then I realized that my life really wasn't just about, you know, do I know how to come up with the right numbers? But I was truly inspired by how I left people better off. And it's at that point that I remember that there is clearly a difference between skill and gift. And while I had the skill of analytical prowess, if you will, I had the skill of being very good at math. The thing that inspired me and left me different was this gift that ultimately tied to what I thought my life was about. And that truly was about leaving people better off. Now, this is sort of a long way to the answer here, but ultimately I felt like every person I talked to, every conversation I had with Meg, every conversation I had with Chaya, ultimately I was supposed to leave them better off. If you remember what Maya Angelou said, people never remember what you said or what you did. They remember how you made them feel. And that is really what charged me. So then as an analytical person, what does that mean? Like I'm fairly analytical, an analytical person who has to sort of deal with this sort of softness of, you know, this sort of touchy-feely thing, then you translate that into, I can make people better off by leveraging my analytical skills. And from going through several mergers, acquisitions, actually having turned around business units, taking units that were underperforming, taking people who were underperforming, I realized that I had a skill in decision-making and realized that in critical decision-making points, particularly during periods of change, that not everybody that's good at doing their job is really good at making decisions. A person who's good at steady state is not good at change. And so I was going to take that skill set and that decision-making and translate that into my business. So that transition from Wells Fargo could have very well been, hey, let me start a firm that focuses on financial services companies and banks and how they finance things. But ultimately, my gift really was, how do you make leaders understand the impact of their decision-making? And you can truly transform businesses by truly transforming that decision maker. How does that decision maker make their decisions? And how do they understand that the decision-making process is so much more dynamic than the process of going through what's right, what's wrong, going through the checklist? And that ultimately is how I ended up making the decision to go from Wells Fargo and focus on strategy consulting. Long way to get there, but I think why is so much more important than what. And what is that motivation? Because ultimately, that's really what has the impact on people's lives.
Thanks, Brenda. That's a wonderful answer. I mean, also, it's interesting to know your journey towards what you do today. And I'm just curious to know if you have any mentors or role models in your career that kind of made you think through this and determine this process, and you feel, this is a effective way of making decisions. Often when I have to make decisions, sometimes I try to think about people that I know as successful leaders and imagine, what they would do in these situations. And then I start to think about, how I can respond to them. Right. So do you have role models and any mentors in your career that helped you to grow to this point?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting thing. Yes, I'm self-made. Everything that's great about me, I made it myself. No, just I woke as Beyonce said, I woke up like this. So I will tell you, one of the things that I truly believe is I chose a mentor that was aligned with my purpose and not with my skill, right? I chose someone who could help promote what I believe my purpose was in life and not help me with that skill set. And that, I think, is a really fundamental difference, because ultimately it talks very clearly about what I believe the real impact of the difference is. I don't think that I'm the smartest person in the room, but I do know that I am smart, and that I do know also that I have gaps. So there was a woman growing up when I was in banking who actually plucked me up out of a group where I had no experience whatsoever. There were a line of people, Chaya, there were a line of people waiting for the next job. She plucked me up amongst all these other people and said, hey, I think she's smart. I think she's smart. I think she knows how to solve problems. We're going to put her in this place. Now, I was like so excited when she chose me for that job. But little did I know that when she chose me, it was like the worst performing group in the entire division. So it was just like, how do I fix this mess? I was excited about that. But what I learned is the idea of believing in people and championing people and being the kind of person that everybody else would be looking to emulate. And so that's how I chose her. That's how I identified her. I think she put herself in that place and became the mentor, and I learned to believe in people. Learned to believe in people who sometimes other people have put to the side, and I believed in developing and seeing the potential in other people. That, I think, is what made me a better leader. And I also will say this really quickly, is that there's a mentor, but I also believe in the concept of a board of advisors, because not one person actually can house all of the information and perspective that you need. And while this person may have been good in that respect and clearly understood the banking business and could help me, but I also believe that there were other areas of development where maybe I needed a Chaya, maybe I needed a Meg, I needed somebody else, and recognizing that those things were important.
That's really a great point. Yeah. So decision making doesn't mean that you individually make decisions. It's important that you gather all the facts and figures that are required to support your decision, right? And also, you made a very good point about being able to believe in your strengths. You need to have that confidence. You have to believe in your strengths. At the same time, you also need to be able to appreciate your weaknesses. So it kind of helps you to learn from, some of the experiences you have. So when you during your career, also being the chairman of Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber, and also being a CEO of your company, I'm sure there are some difficult times where you came across some situations, you struggled to make decisions. And in such scenarios, how do you kind of decide what's the effective way to make a decision? Do you have a formula or a methodology that you follow?
It's interesting, I love to say that I have this all figured out, right? So, I have this sort of reliable way that I do things. And every time I pull the trigger on that, everything works completely well. But I will tell you that the people who are the best decision makers, people who made mistakes. The people who are the best decision makers are the people who have fallen on their faces. No one wants to talk to the person that's fallen on their face, but the person who's fallen on their face is a person who understands what went wrong. In the decision-making process, the value of falling on your face is understanding what I call conscious competence, right? So sometimes if we keep doing things and everything's going well, we don't really quite even know why we're doing well. We're just like riding the wave. You cannot replicate success if you don't understand the triggers that get you there. So I would just say, first of all, you really do have to have an appreciation for the experience that people bring to the table. So with my clients, it's all about, I can show you and talk to you about things and stop you from making the mistakes that I made because I've actually done those. But with respect to actually the decision making, this, certainly being in technology and having led a successful business, there are tons of models that are out there. Everybody will tell you the decision making step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And you get off this call and you will remember nothing of what I said because I went through a 12-step process. You won't remember anything. But what you do want to remember is in decision making, this is what works for me. What is it that I'm actually trying to solve? What is a problem on the table? And why is it a problem? Like, of all the thousands of things that I could be deciding on, why is this one an important one for me to discuss? And do we all agree that this one is a problem, right? Like, I walked to a client's office one time and they started talking about, let's talk about how we grow revenue. We think that we have an issue growing revenue, and let's talk about geographic focus. And when we finally sat down and talked about it, we realized that they had started to lose some of their senior leaders in the company who were driving growth because they were in an organization where they felt like they had nowhere to go, in an organization that truly promoted what they felt was this sort of paternalistic, we're going to take care of everybody. But they felt like the next person in line was Chaya's daughter, right? Was Brenda's daughter, right? There was no place for them. So how do you build a growing organization that promotes the worth of everybody? So sometimes what you think the problem is really isn't the problem. And then I'll say, how do you know when you get there? That's another question. What are we solving? Why are we solving it? Why is this important? Who cares about this? And how do we know when we get there? What are the metrics? And if those are the metrics, are those the right metrics? Just because I say we need to get to 15% growth, we need to do this and that's a measure of success. Is that really the measure of success? I'll say this really quick. I have like 1,000 stories. That's what happens when you get to be my age. But I had this finance manager. I sat down with him, and we were asking about a budget, and I said, this number really doesn't seem to make sense. That we are budgeting, $15 million for X, and that number doesn't seem to jive with what we think the future is going to be. So he says to me, well, that's kind of what the run rate is. I said, well, the run rate doesn't make sense. He said, well, that's kind of how we've always done it. That's kind of how we measure things. Well, have you ever thought about the idea that the way you measure things isn't the right way to measure things? I mean, so we've got to, and this is a thing that we find in a lot of the larger corporations. We have very, very smart people, very, very smart people who operate in the context of the rules that they have been given. What is it that you don't know? What are your blind spots? Who's saying yes because that's the thing to say? What perspectives are not represented in the room? How many ads have you seen that have gone to public and you say, how in the world did they come forth with that kind of ad? Who was in the room when they made that decision? Everybody that agreed with that decision that did not ask the question. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And always continuing to ask what the measures of success are and how they connect to your larger vision.
I mean, excellent points, Brenda. I do agree with you. You know, it's what you don't know, you don't know. So it's important to kind of open those, you know, the hard walls and rules around you, and giving that freedom to people to make those decisions. I mean, the other great thing you said is about, yes, allowing people to make mistakes, and that's how you learn, right? And because it's like we teach our children, you're making the decision and you're responsible for the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm there to support you. I think as long as the leaders understand that and take that as a principle to operate, I think people would have a lot more flexibility in making decisions. One other interesting thing I came across recently is I was reading the Harvard Business Review, which says that women hold about 50% of all managerial positions and professional positions in the United States, and account for 41% of employees with authority to make purchasing decisions. And other studies also say that women are better corporate leaders. I'm not saying anything against men here, because of the, you know, with the abilities to make fair decisions when competing interests are at stake. So, but we still see a lower percentage of women represented in the executive level positions in the companies. I know it's changing, but it's not at the pace you want it to be. So what additional decision-making skills do you suggest for women to kind of overcome that, you know, hesitance in making decisions, to overcome that fear? Because end of the day, I'm responsible for the decisions I'm making, yet there are more, you know, you see sometimes men making decisions like this, and you know, they're ready to take that level of risk, even sometimes without having sufficient data. They just make the decision on the gut feel, and women hesitate a lot. At managerial level, we are good, but as we go up the ladder, there is a problem there. So what do you think what's your advice to these women to overcome those fear factors so that they can go up the ladder?
I'll say, I'll probably tackle it from two perspectives. One is, if we are one of the women that's in the room, we have a responsibility to reach back and support the women who are in the room. Some of us are this is a very difficult kind of statement to make, but sometimes we are comfortable being the only one in the room. We're happy to be the only one in the room. So we don't reach back, and we don't identify those who should be in the room with us. And the second thing is, sometimes we don't remember what it felt like to be invisible. One of the things that I completely am an advocate of is that people want to feel like they matter. And one of the things I was a huge advocate of is not always calling on the person who's dancing on the table, but my responsibility was to make sure that I highlighted the talents of those who weren't always getting the assignment, who really were the most talented ones. So that's sort of my kind of, you know, side perspective on that. In terms of, you know, women being in the room, I think one of the things that we have to do is believe that we belong in the room. And I'll have to say this really very, very clearly. We sometimes second guess because other people are second guessing whether we should be there. We spend most of our time when we're in the room trying to prove that we're in the room, as opposed to adding to the value of the discussion. Running our resume, making sure that everybody else is comfortable that we're there. So a lot of the work that we need to do before we actually get in the room is working on ourselves. We're always prepared when we walk in the room. there's statistics that say that literally 100% of men who apply for a job will apply for a job that they only have marginal skills for, right? And only 60%, I mean, women literally, unless they have 100% of the skills, they won't even apply for it.
Perfectionist.
So we believe, and we need to understand that we've got to do the work ourselves to believe that we should be in the room, and we've got to change what our goal is in the room. Being in the room isn't about winning the argument and winning the fight. That's the old way of doing things. Am I winning the fight? Who cares who wins? There's a researcher who I absolutely adore. I almost run my practice, almost run my life based on what she says. Her name is Brenda Brown. She's a researcher out of University of Texas. She talks about this whole concept of vulnerability. She said, it isn't about winning, it isn't about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. Not just being in the room, but being seen for the value that you want to bring. So when you come into the room, it is not just how do I help answer the questions, because God knows we have read all the books. We come in with 15 satchels of books when we come in. We want to know all the answers. But the question is, if our only measure of success is whether or not we were the one that was given credit for the decision, we will always be disappointed. Question is, how do we want to be remembered? What is the voice that we want to leave in that room? What is it that I want to stand for? I am Chaya, the balanced perspective. I am the one who's able to help people see what they weren't able to see. My contribution to this decision isn't about me getting credit for it. It's about arriving at the right decision. That's a leadership perspective. And that doesn't happen when you walk in the room. It happens before you come in the room. It is about getting yourself emotionally centered. It's sort of at the core of what my practice taught out, that emotionally centered leaders, be they men or female, make better decisions. I come in and I'm worried about whether Chaya is going to fire me if I make this decision, or John's going to fire me, then I've completely lost sight of what my mission is. How I make decisions influenced by my anxiety, my fear, by the fact that I don't think I belong. So I'm engaging in a conversation, quite frankly, that doesn't even add value to the whole process because I haven't even gotten control of myself. Who am I? How do I want to show up? I set that rule, because what will be remembered after this isn't the decision that was made or who ultimately helped make that decision, but how do you show up? What kind of decision maker is she? How did she add to the value of this?
That's great. I used to work for a company where I learned, through my experience that it's one of our top leader. He always used to say, for contribution doesn't mean that you sit there and keep talking something. You just have to contribute or say something. You just don't have to say it. You have to think about what value are you adding by saying something, right? So that's a great point where you said, you got to be emotionally centered and you need to be able to bring value to the contribution, not necessarily looking for a credit for what you said or have done. So that's a great point. Also having that self-confidence. If constantly second guess everything that we say or do, and we don't have that self-confidence, I think it's very, very, very difficult to make your voice heard in the room.
The thing, though, Chaya, is sometimes we are scared, and sometimes we're afraid to say that we're scared. And I think that's sort of the old mantra, and I'm very, very uncomfortable with stereotypes, but I do think that sort of historically it's the person who can beat their chest, the person who could at the end of the day is the winner, after it's all said and done. And, when the board meeting is over, I was the one who ultimately made that decision. That isn't really what life is about, is not really the measure of success. is really trying to find that place where we say to ourselves, so I could lie to myself and say, hey, I'm good, I'm walking into the meeting, I got this over, when I know in my heart there's this underlying issue that I'm insecure about that I never really addressed. And it's okay to say, you know what, I don't think I even understand that. I will tell you this, and was a powerful moment in my career. Because I would always be in rooms where there were very few women and very few people of color or women of color, I almost felt like on my shoulder lay the weight of every woman, and so I could not make a mistake.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I could not reveal vulnerabilities. I could not. And where I found that I was able to teach more people is to share more of who I was, what those vulnerabilities were, and the resilience that it takes to make a mistake, understand publicly what that learning is, and teach someone else, and you ultimately be people better off. Who in this life has never made a mistake besides me, right? Like, who has never made a mistake? The power of leadership, and you know this, you try things. I mean, you run into successful business. You've had people say, why are you in the room? You're in a room with that's predominantly, male dominated. You're promoting a field where there aren't that many women. Your measure of success has to be more than, did I always get it right?
Mm. Yeah, very true. Very true. I think, again, as you said, I mean, as a leader, I see when you are running these chamber board meetings, you're very down to earth, and you make sure everybody has the opportunity to speak. It's kind of, people have to feel that level of comfort to be vulnerable and say anything they want to say, rather than thinking 1,000 times and trying to suppress, what they're trying to say because of the fear of what other people would think of them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also about creating that atmosphere, for people to be able to open up and be vulnerable to say things on their mind. And that's also one of the things it leads into another question, especially I'm adding a little bit of corporate layer here. I have worked in bigger corporates where I felt that, these organizations struggle with long decision processing time, and also because of the multiple decision layers and approvals that are required. I still remember in one organization where I used to work that they had to really implement a whole methodology around decision making and a decision framework. The models and things like that. So even train the reporting managers, higher authorities on how they should allow some flexibility to their reporting teams to be able to make decisions. So did you come across such situations, and what advice do you have for the organizations like this, where they need to be more nimble to, allow fast decision making? So did you come across that, and what kind of advice did you give them?
Well, I will say this, not as if all of my advice is great advice, and I would, although I do promote it as such. So I will say this, there are companies that absolutely have to have a structure. I'm a person who believes and have always believed in a philosophy that success is not accidental, that it is the result of your intent, your processes that are aligned with a larger vision, and that you don't accidentally wake up one day and you're successful, and you don't wake up one day and you're a complete failure. You've got to be very deliberate about what is it I'm trying to accomplish and what are the steps that are aligned. Now, the current economic shutdown and the pandemic has sort of thrown a little bit out of the window because there are things that we just didn't anticipate. But by and large, you've got to be very deliberate about the actions that you take and how those will ultimately lead to success. The challenge sometimes in the larger corporations is that rubric for what is successful is the thing that propelled them to success, but also is the thing that can ultimately stifle them. No decision-making process is good if it is not a dynamic one that we revisit every now and then. And companies get in trouble because they believe that the context in which they make decisions and the rubric that they have is one that is gospel. Now, it may be one that has gotten them to success, but one that they don't have to tweak, and by the way, they don't hold it up to scrutiny. I remember setting up an advisory committee when I was in the bank, primarily because I just wanted to hear what others inside the company wouldn't tell me. Not because I didn't open up and provide people with the feedback, but I do think that people very quickly learn what's efficient in making decisions, what's acceptable, what they don't want to get their hands slapped for, right? And so you've got to be vulnerable enough to say, perhaps there's a perspective that I don't see. As good as I am, and as wonderful as this process is, I need to revisit it. And that's why outside consultants are always good for the larger corporations, because if I get used to making decisions based on a certain context, and maybe I'm the out-of-the-box thinker within the company, but I'm doing it in the comfort of what's not going to get me in trouble, right? So I do think that that process works because you've got to continue to revisit, you've got to challenge, and you've got to be okay with the fact that someone may come back and say, hey, Brenda, hey, Chaya, you know, that thing that did well for you the last 15 years, that just doesn't work anymore because there's an emerging group, or there's a group that you were not catering to that now has a bigger voice, right? And now they can influence how your customers think about things. Just thinking about whether or not the decision in the room is acceptable, and this is where people get in trouble. I'm part of the group that was part of the majority. I voted with everybody else. I wasn't the only person in the room that didn't agree. That can be trouble for your company long term, because you get into this group think and you get into this fear that if I am an outlier, then I'm not accepted, I'm not considered a team player, and I'm not valuable to the company.
Got it. Yep. Very true. So, but did you come across situations where you made a decision and the outcome wasn't as favorable as you wanted it to be? And how did you take it, and what did you learn from it? Do you have anything you can share with us?
Where I've made a calculation and it didn't work out the way I wanted it. Now, everything I've ever done in my life has been absolutely perfect. So I'm trying to think of what is a good one.
This would be a bit of a motivation for people who kind of
people what?
Who hesitate to make decisions, don't want to take that risk, you know. If we can, you know, there are situations I made decisions and I failed utterly, you know, that was not the outcome I expected. But you can go and fix it.
Yeah,
but
I do think that decision making is always in the context of risk management. So the question really is, what are you actually ultimately risking, and is that risk worth it? Right. So I make a decision to roll out this project, this new product line. It's going to cost us so many millions of dollars to do it. If it works, you know, my face is on the box of the next Wheaties, and I don't even eat cereal, but I'll just say that. But if it goes bad, the company can lose a lot. So you do have to. So there is a certain amount of rigor, and I will tell you that as a sort of a kind of analytically minded person. you've got to really think about. So you don't just throw caution to the wind, but you got to be very clear about what it is you are trying to accomplish and what the risks of the downside are, and what and those risks from a financial, there's certainly different metrics, company reputation, reputation of my division. What about my boss who made the last time he went forth with a recommendation that I made, he got demoted. I mean, like there are all these things that are in the back of your mind. So every decision that you make really does have to have a lens of risk management. But I think it can never be just about the moment, and it always has to be about how it aligns to the larger purpose.
Yeah.
Because we can make decisions that are just about the here and now, and because it's expedient, we become the day trader. The day trader, you know, the market closes, you just start afresh. Well, life isn't really like that. It's sort of this continuous thing. What I did today actually has an impact tomorrow.
Very true. Very true. And just keeping track of the time, I think one last question I have is,
Sure.
Brenda, as a chairman, again, of Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber, do you have any recommendations for people that may be struggling to flex with the changes demanded due to COVID-19? And I know lately your focus has been a lot on that, about how to, address some of the challenges that the coming across, and I'm sure there are many businesses that have come across. What has been your advice? And I know you're also on the board of Phil Murphy's advisory council, return to work, decisions, how you're going to help make those decisions. Do you want to share some of your, thought process there and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I'll, and I'm not sure this will always make sense to people, but every time I say it in my mind, it seems to make sense to me. So hopefully it makes sense as I'm speaking out loud. So I do tend to think about things in a very sort of linear, methodical way. And I think about things in categories. So when you talk to me, I generally am not this person that throws out a lot of different ideas. It feels chaotic to me, even though it's a good, everybody thinks about things differently. I just know how my brain is wired, and that is I have to sort of think about things in categories. What do those categories mean? And for me, they've been sort of these three focus areas. And that is, it's interesting that when I became the chair of the Princeton Chamber, one of my, I was very, excited about it. I have been on the board for about, 5 years or so. Was proud of being a woman of color, and from what I understand, specifically the first African-American woman to lead a chamber in the state of New Jersey. So I came up with this whole idea that we had just gone through this merger, and we were going to be the real force for business, a significant chamber, over 8,000 to 10,000 people that we touched, 1,800 members. And so therefore, I have this philosophy that to whom much is given, much is required. You're a bigger organization, you got to make a bigger impact. Then lo and behold, something called a pandemic happened and the shutdown happened. So all bets were off. Okay, so you woke up this morning thinking you were going to do this, but I think we probably should do something a little different. And then I started thinking about, strategically, I'm very much a big picture person. How do I understand the big picture? And how do we influence the chamber? So we set up this COVID-19 ad hoc committee, and we talked a little bit yesterday at the board meeting. And that really is all these experts that sort of understand fundamentally these sort of triggers about what is impacting the New Jersey economy. We had head of a hospital, research from a pharmaceutical. We have an attorney, insurance people, all of them to talk about the impact of that and how does their expertise help shape the priorities of the chamber. That was my big focus, and how do we actually then better educate the membership. Second priority was the stability of the chamber itself. Like other businesses, it had to figure out how it was going to make money differently. how it was going to engage the clients. So how do I get a realistic picture of what the financial prospects and sustainability of the chamber was? And thirdly was, how do we actually make sure that we were able to add value to businesses in the community? So what are the big issues right now? Businesses have been closed. We've been able to provide information around PPP resources, provide webinars, make sure that they had access to information, and to make sure that at least the resources that were available to them from a financial perspective could at least tide them over. This third phase, and you mentioned me being on the advisory council for the governor, is really, so now that you, in theory, and there are some issues with the funding piece of it, I will admit, and there are some other supplemental resources that really need to be, that we really do need to visit in a real way to make sure that businesses are getting what they need. But long story is, then now that you're at this place, we're on the verge of reopening. What are the issues that are important for businesses as they get to reopen? So on the advisory council, there are 9 different committees. I happen to be on the professional services one. There was a survey that was taken, and the biggest issue is, how do I know when it's safe to open up the business? How do I make sure that I can protect the employees? How do I make sure that I'm able to protect the employees? And I'm a sort of a field of, this person that refers to this movie called Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. So all of a sudden you open up, you have your protective information, and obviously protective equipment, of which that's part of the priority. How do we make sure that businesses know what they need in order to open up? Big focus for me is, how do I make sure that if I build it, if I open it, people are willing to come? Just because you open up doesn't mean that someone's going to come. So how do we make sure that the clients and the employees are really focused on, understand that they are safe, that when we do open, that they are safe? And then from my own business's perspective, I'm not one that believes that you wait to the last minute. You don't know what's going to happen. You really don't even know the timing. We know that we're on this trajectory, but you can't wait until the doors open before you decide what you want to do. So I believe that you've got to start to think about, what does life look like on the other side? Explore those ideas. My company, which has historically worked with mid-sized and larger companies, recently launched what we call a restructure, to make sure that all businesses, mid-sized and smaller businesses and individuals that have questions about how they survive, literally to get on the phone for an hour. Because some of the businesses, I don't have, months, I can't engage months, to talk through your strategies. I've got an issue on the table, I have an idea on the table. I'm a person that can help you understand what's missing, or to let's talk about independently what your thought is. Does this make sense? Spend an hour with me. So we've sort of restructured, so we offer that opportunity to businesses, to individuals, to executives. So you have people on your team that you might want us to talk to, or companies that up to this point don't want to engage for a long period of time, but want to just talk through their issue. If you go to our website, you can actually click on the virtual strategy session, sign up for an hour, decide whether that leads to a larger engagement, but at least you can talk through what it really takes for you to survive. Because the Harvard Business Review released an article sort of a while ago around how you should reinvent your business. Business owners are smart. They understand their issues. But what usually happens to most people, and per the Harvard Business Review, is that they wait too long to pull the trigger. That whole issue of courage that you keep talking about, decision making isn't just about process. It's about courage. It's about pulling the trigger. It's about sometimes when you're not completely comfortable, but knowing that you got to make a step. It's like the time when I'm in my house and all of a sudden I start doing like 5 loads of laundry and then, reorganizing all the cabinets. Then I realize I think I'm like procrastinating. Like I'm really scared of something. So I'm trying to make myself feel like I'm productive until something comes. Decision making is so much about courage, and it's so much about the clarity of what you believe your purpose is, what it is you ultimately believe that you are what you're trying to accomplish, and then feeling that enough courage, that is not that you're not afraid, but overcoming that fear and saying, what I'm trying to pursue is so much greater than this, and I got to pull the trigger. So the delay sometimes I think is, oh, I don't know, should I talk to her? I think I know everything, Business people are smart. They always know, but the question really is, do they know the right perspective? What do they understand about what they don't see?
Yeah, that's very true. Especially for making decisions, it's not all about what you know and what what your objective, whether you're meeting your objective or not. It is also to be able to go to the other side and understand the impact. With the outcome of your decision is going to impact something else. I think the pandemic situation is a great example. It's from an economic side of the state or the country. You want to open up, but again, going to the other side and being very careful and maintaining that balance when you make those decisions, so that the impact is not so severe that it actually dilutes the whole purpose of making this decision to open up. I think it's a very delicate balance. And it's a great conversation. Thank you so much, Brenda. And I just want to give you minutes for have Meg come back and see if we have any questions.
Hey, I'm back. So we did get actually a really great question from one of our viewers. They wrote to you, Brenda. They said, as a successful leader in a large company like Wells Fargo, what are 2 or 3 traits other than making the numbers that you could use to identify effective leaders?
I think a leader has to be one who's very clear about what their purpose is. And is committed to that purpose and aligns their actions to that purpose. So ultimately, if you believe that as a leader, there's a question about what do leaders do? Do leaders make greater followers, or do leaders make more leaders? And I fundamentally believe that leaders make more leaders. So how do you impart your knowledge to improve leadership skill, the leadership courage, and the leadership discipline that ultimately impacts others? Because our focus around transforming decision makers in order to transform companies is so fundamental. The person at the top sets the tone, and if you can build that kind of leader, that's an ultimate measure of success.
You're definitely right about that. I'm a big believer in that whole top-down thing, and the leader dictates what. So I completely hear you on that. And then just one more quick one. We had a listener that was really intrigued by your skills versus gifts talk. I guess they could tell that's really rooted in your heart. But she was wondering how you can tell that difference in yourself. Any tips for anyone trying to determine what their skills are versus their own gifts, if they're reflecting internally a bit? How does someone figure that out for themselves? Just know.
It's an interesting thing. So I always have like 15 different ways to answer a question, right? So I just recently started taking these interior design courses, right? And because even as an analytical person, I never thought that I was creative, but I am actually have this sort of intuitive, I'll say gift, if you will, around being able to see something and decorate it and make it look different. It's something that I can't always intellectually explain, but it's something that sort of moves me and connects to something. So if someone said, well, how do you do that? Well, when I stood in the room, it just didn't feel right. It's so weird. It just didn't feel right. Like this couch just really needed to be in a different place. I don't know if there's another way for me to to explain it. But you have to understand, you've got to seek this idea of what your higher purpose is in life. And I do think that the connection to what you believe your connection is, what am I supposed to do? It's not what am I supposed to do in life, but what am I supposed to be? Like when I am in this world, not how many companies, but ultimately, what am I supposed to be? And that I think ultimately connects to, and I think if you present it that way, you ultimately get back to what your gift is. Because I think gift is connected to your purpose. That's sort of my own definition. Everybody else may have their own. And because if you give, and I'll get back to your question, if you give someone a set of metrics to pursue, and they may do all the activities necessary to hit those numbers as you mentioned, but the ability to continue to do the activities when no one else in the room is so much tied to what is the real purpose of these numbers that I'm hitting, and do I see the mission behind that, and am I inspired this goal because it connects to a higher purpose. And having goals and benchmarks without it being tied to a higher purpose will get you short-term success. It will not get you long-term success. It will not get you buy-in. It will not get you people showing up every single day. And quite frankly, all of us as businesses have things that we don't want to do. Everything like that, everything is always wonderful, but you have to like dig in crazy, but they're important, but you do them because they connect to this higher purpose. You can never disconnect. Every time you disconnect from this bigger purpose, you become short-sighted, and I think you lose the ability to be consistent in your engagement and your overall performance.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. It sounds like a lot of it comes from really your gut, just understanding who you are and who you are like deep inside to drive your actions. We do have a couple more questions, but we're just about bumping up on time right now. So I'd love to, I'm going to just share my screen real quick. That way you all can join me on my PowerPoint. We were joined today by Chaya Pamula and Brenda Ross-Dulan. We'd love for everyone to come and stop by and join us at SheTek.net. We're going to keep on this conversation going. We'll get these remaining questions answered in our follow-up conversation. At SheTek.net, we believe in engaging, empowering, and employing to get more women into the technology pipeline. That is SheTek's true driving mission. We engage you with our active discussion board. We've got lots of things that we talk about over there, and there are top tech women that regularly participate in our discussions. So you can really find somebody that can understand you and help you with issues that you deal with every day. We also have a unique matchmaking system. So if you need a mentor, or you just want to connect with that board of directors that Brenda was just talking about, SheTek.net is a great place to find them. We empower you to find new roles with trainings and systems that you need in the workplace today. We'll help you pad your resume. We got Salesforce, Tableau, DevOps, Scrum, everything that you need in today's tech workforce. Get set up on SheTek. We'll increase your skills, increase your learning, increase your knowledge. And then when you're ready for the next role, we'll employ you. We post new jobs every week. Come and get these hot jobs. We've got AI testers, Microsoft roles all around the country, remote, New Jersey, New York, all over the place. Come join us. SheTek.net. We want to get you a job. We want to get you set up. We want you in tech. Thank you so much for joining us today. Any more questions? Email us at contact@shetek.net or join us in the SheTek community. Chaya, did you want to wrap up?
Thank you so much, Meg. Again, I personally invite everyone to join the SheTek community. We are trying to extend that community, provide as many resources as possible. Our end goal is to have more women, tech women, in the pipeline so the organizations can meet their internal diversity goals. So there is a lot of information going on. Meg is doing a wonderful job managing the community. So please stay tuned for more webinars coming up, and Meg will be sending that information over. But again, once again, Brenda, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing all your experience and great points throughout the discussion. So thanks a lot.
All right, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank